afternoon. Well, one thing that was very clear to me watching the budget was that we are in an economic doom loop and no one seems to recognise it. Neither the last Conservative government nor this Labour government. There isn't really much truth being spoken about just how much trouble we're in. But there was one absolute truth that came from Rachel Reeves this morning, and that was that this government had a very bad inheritance. Just think of it. Tax levels at post-war highs, mass uncontrolled immigration, most people coming, not actually working and being a burden and a massive cost, net zero policies, deindustrialising Britain at a rapid rate, giving us the most expensive energy in the world, and generally debt, which went up about 2.5 times during those 14 years. So
picture this. A general election night where the ballot boxes close, the exit polls drop, and half the country spits out its tea in disbelief. Reform surging. The Conservatives wobbling. Labour hovering like a smug cat near an unattended roast. And somewhere in the middle, a quiet, carefully coordinated manoeuvre ticking away behind the scenes. Tactical voting. Not a slogan. Not a party. A plot. One designed not to win loudly, but to stop someone else from winning it all. Now here's the twist. According to a veteran Conservative MP, this chess move could hand power to what he calls a far-left and less Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch, do the political equivalent of shaking hands while holding their noses. Stay with me, because this is where British politics turns into a thriller with spreadsheets. Quick favor before we dive deeper. If you are enjoying this sharp dive into the madness of British politics, hit that subscribe button and click the notifications bell icon. Most viewers have not subscribed yet. It is free. Takes a second, and it helps British Mirror keep holding a mirror up to Westminster. Thank you if you did. Now, back to the show. This story begins, as many political warnings do, with a man who has been around long enough to have seen fashions, leaders, and party slogans come and go. Andrew Rosendale, Conservative MP for Romford since 2001, a political veteran who remembers when New Labour was new, Brexit was a whisper, and Nigel Farage was still mostly shouting into the wind. Speaking to GB News, Rosendale dropped a line that landed like a warning flare. Failed to unite the right, and Britain could not only see a shock victory for the left, but even a slow-motion backtrack on Brexit itself. Now pause there, because in British politics, few phrases are more emotionally loaded than backtracking on Brexit. For some voters, that is a policy debate. For others, it is a betrayal carved into stone. Rosendale is tapping directly into that anxiety. His argument is simple on the surface. The Conservative Party and Reform sit on the same side of the political spectrum. They talk about sovereignty, borders, law and order, and what they describe as traditional British values. Divide that vote, he says, and you do not get two strong right-wing parties. You get one weakened right, and a left-wing coalition walking through the open door. Here is where the plot thickens, because Rosendale is not talking about Labour alone. He paints a picture of what he calls progressive alliance. Labour, Liberal Democrats, Greens, Scottish National Party, Welsh Nationalists, even Jeremy Corbyn-aligned independents. A political rainbow coalition bound together not by shared love, but by shared opposition. Anti-reform, anti-Farage, anti-right. If this sounds dramatic, that is because it is meant to be, but it is not pure fantasy. Behind the scenes, Labour and Liberal Democrat MPs have reportedly been discussing tactical voting operations ahead of the next general election. Quiet conversations. No banners. No joint press conferences. Just data, maps, and hard calculations about where voters can be nudged to vote strategically rather than emotionally. Think of tactical voting like this. You might love vanilla ice cream, but you know the shop only has chocolate and strawberry left. You hate strawberry, so you vote chocolate, not because you adore it, but because you really, really do not want strawberry to win. Multiply that logic by millions of voters and hundreds of constituencies, and you begin to see how elections can be won without enthusiasm ever entering the room. Polling for more in common added fuel to this fire. Their figures suggested that if around 60% of left-leaning voters voted tactically, Reform's path to power could be blocked. Not crushed, blocked. And in doing so, Labour, the Liberal Democrats, Greens, and nationalist parties could scrape together a wafer-thin majority. Not a landslide, not a triumph. More like winning a pub quiz by half a point because one team forgot the capital of Slovenia. And yet, even this opposed alliance is not exactly harmonious. Enter Zach Polanski, the Green Party leader, who casually lobbed a grenade into the conversation by suggesting he would only consider an alliance with Labour if Sir Keir Starmer was removed as Prime Minister. That is not a small condition. That is like saying you will attend the wedding, but only if the groom leaves before the vows. So already, the so-called Progressive Alliance looks less like a well-drilled army and more like a group chat where nobody can agree on where to eat. But do not underestimate them, because tactical voting does not require love. It requires discipline, and fear can be a very effective motivator. We have seen this film before. In 2019, coordinated efforts aimed to stop Brexit altogether. In 2024, similar energy was channeled into removing the Conservatives from power. And in October last year, the carefully by-election offered a real-world case study. Plaid Cymru's Lindsay Whittle managed to pull thousands of former Labour voters into a single tactical push, beating Reform by nearly 4,000 votes. Anti-Reform activists watched that result like football managers replaying a successful corner kick. If it worked there, could it work elsewhere? That question is now haunting Westminster, because Nigel Farage is no longer just a media personality with a loud voice and a pint in hand. He is an MP, the Clecton MP, to be precise, and he is slowly, methodically pulling figures away from the Conservative Party. Over 20 defections, several former donors, big names, big wallets, big headlines. Reform is no longer a protest party shouting from the outside. It is setting up furniture inside the house. Farage himself has not exactly been subtle about his ambitions. He has spoken openly about a reverse takeover of the Conservative Party. Not a deal, not a pact, a takeover, the political equivalent of buying the company you used to complain about. He has even said he would destroy his Conservative rivals at the ballot box. Subtlety, clearly, is not the strategy. On the other side of this tense standoff stands Kemi Badenoch, a figure seen by many Conservatives as a future leader, a reset button, and a line in the sand. She has been equally blunt. Get into bed with Farage. She warned, and your party is finished. The image alone, she joked grimly, is enough to end the conversation. So here we are, the right divided, the left coordinating, and voters watching this political tennis match wondering who, if anyone, is actually playing for them. A Reform source summed up their position with refreshing bluntness. They already expect the establishment to do everything it can to stop reform. That is precisely why, they argue, patriotic Britons who care about borders, law and order, and rewarding hard work must vote reform. Not tactically, not strategically, directly. To them, reform is not the spoiler. It is a solution. And yet, that logic runs headlong into Rosendahl's warning. Split the vote, and you do not just weaken the right. You risk handing the keys to a coalition that could unwind years of policy, including Brexit itself. Whether that fear is justified or exaggerated depends largely on where you sit. But politically, it is potent. One veteran Tory campaigner put it starkly. Labour must be stopped at all costs. Serious conversations, he said, are needed as the election approaches about how that is achieved. Not after, not in hindsight, before the damage is done. Such a recruitment drive would create additional difficulties for Sir Keir Starmer, whose standing within the union movement has already weakened following Andrea Egan's election as Unison's General Secretary. Additional difficulties. That's diplomatic language for absolute nightmare. Sir Keir is already struggling with union relations, and now the NEU is about to trigger a massive internecine conflict within the union movement that will inevitably spill into Labour politics. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. The unions fund Labour. They provide money, volunteers, organizational capacity. When unions fight each other, Labour gets caught in the crossfire. When unions pursue aggressive political strategies independent of Labour's direction, it undermines a party's authority and complicates its messaging. An NEU spokesperson stated, with admirable blandness, that the NEU believes all trade unions should work together to ensure every worker in every school is organized and has a union voice. All trade unions should work together. That's a lovely sentiment that completely contradicts the reality of what they're actually doing, which is breaking agreements with other unions and triggering a recruitment war. It's the organizational equivalent of saying we believe in peaceful cooperation while simultaneously launching a military invasion. The cognitive dissonance is spectacular. The NEU was established in 2017 through a merger of two unions, the larger which did not include support staff among its membership. So the current structure of the NEU was specifically designed to exclude support workers from active recruitment. That wasn't an accident oversight. That was a deliberate structural decision made during merger negotiations to accommodate the concerns of other unions. To address concerns from rival unions worried about member poaching, the NEU committed not to actively recruit support workers, despite inheriting tens of thousands from the smaller union in the merger. So they made a promise, a clear, explicit commitment not to poach members from other unions' traditional recruitment territories. And now they are planning to break that promise because they decided political circumstances require it. A source critical of the plans explained the problem beautifully, stating that solidarity is central to trade unionism. Leaving the TUC will reduce solidarity and reduce the strength of our movement. NEU management's aggressive will to leave is therefore unfathomable. Unfathomable, incomprehensible, inexplicable. This insider, presumably someone with deep roots in the union movement, genuinely cannot understand why the NEU would willingly weaken union solidarity and fracture the movement over this issue. From their perspective, it's self-destructive, counterproductive, and fundamentally at odds with trade union principles. But here's the thing. From Daniel Cabetta's perspective, it probably makes perfect sense. If you genuinely believe Reform UK represents an existential threat to education, to workers' rights, to progressive values generally, then tactical considerations about union solidarity might seem secondary. If you think a Farage government would be so damaging that any action to prevent or undermine it is justified, then breaking a few agreements and antagonizing fellow unions might seem like a price worth paying. It's a classic ends justify the means calculation. The question is whether the threat is actually as severe as they believe, and whether this strategy will actually work. Elsewhere, those in higher education circles have been weighing up what could be expected from a future reform administration. So it's not just the NEU preparing for this possibility. University leadership is also gaming it out. Late last year, it was revealed that top university dons had held meetings with key people within Nigel Farage's party to learn about the possible implications of a reform government. Top university dons. Meeting with reform representatives. That's extraordinary. University leadership engaging directly with a party they presumably have serious concerns about, trying to understand what policies they might face, what threats might emerge, what accommodations might be necessary. This tells you something profound about how seriously institutional Britain is taking the possibility of a reform government. When education unions are planning resistance campaigns and university administrators are holding secret meetings to understand the threat, that's not paranoia. That's institutional risk assessment. That's organizations looking at polling data showing reform at 27%, looking at labor collapsing to 18%, looking at upcoming elections, and thinking we need to prepare for a scenario that seemed impossible a year ago. The really interesting question is whether this strategy will backfire. Union recruitment drives are all well and good, but they require persuading workers that union membership is valuable. That's easier when you're fighting for better pay or working conditions. It's considerably harder when your pitch is essentially join us so we can undermine a political party you might actually support. Because here's the uncomfortable reality the NEU has to grapple with. Some of those 500,000 support workers they're targeting probably voted for reform. Some of them probably agree with reform's policies on immigration, on national identity, on cultural issues. Trying to recruit them into a union explicitly dedicated to undermining the party they support might not go brilliantly.